that underlay Kerala. And finally, I wanted to look at Johnny Miranda's book, opened up a way of reconceiving Kerala, because it seemed to embody a kind of subaltern cosmopolitanism that we were really not paying any attention to, and I think it also adds significantly to our contribution to the debate on cosmopolitanism as well, which I shall talk about as I present this paper. So, in this paper I actually start with the ways in which we have conceived of Kerala. I mean, I'm not going into, again, we don't have time to get into the way Kerala has been conceived in detail, but let me just begin by saying that the history of the modern regional identity in Kerala has largely been understood in terms of its relationship with the history of the Indian subcontinent. We know Kerala history. Any history student here will know, you study Indian history, you study then Kerala history, and you study Kerala history as somehow connected to Indian history. That's how you do it. Now, Kerala has been, however, we all know that Kerala has been part of the Indian Ocean world of trade, and these connections are much better acknowledged in explorations of pre-modern and medieval past. So we keep talking about Roman trade and Musuris and all that. I mean, it's also got into popular discourse in a very big way. In present day, these connections are cherished as exotic. They are also highlighted at times to point to a history of global connections, to almost prove that Kerala has always been globalized, unlike other parts of India. So it's been a very important part of Malayali exceptionalism. The kind of argument that say that Malayalis are exceptional within the Indian subcontinent. So in such narratives, Kerala's connections with ancient Rome, the Arab world and Europe are emphasized, and for example, its connections to the immediate neighbors like Sri Lanka, the Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia particularly. So this has led to a sort of two kinds of responses, both equally self-congratulatory. So one is the claim that Kerala has always received diverse cultures peacefully. It's not war but peace. And in some sense, and therefore we have always been modern in some sense. That's one self-congratulation that we have given, always indulged in. The other is actually a compliment given to us by outsiders. And here I want to cite Ashish Nandi's essay on Cochin, where, I quote him, he says that Kochi is a rare Indian city where pre-colonial traditions of cultural pluralism refuse to die. So he claims that for its residents, Kochi is the ultimate symbol of cultural diversity and religious and ethnic tolerance. And of course he does this by rejecting professional ethnography and history. He says these are totalizing discourses, and this is based on a more personal cultural psychological journey. This is another kind of peril. Now, this is a kind of cosmopolitanism. I mean, he's basically saying that Kochi represents a pre-modern cosmopolitanism. Now, that I think is a kind of compliment that we should take with more than a pinch of salt, simply because it does not even we do not have any way of then asking the question why some communities figure prominently in and others vanish from this immediate felt reality that Nandi is always pointing towards. So what you're seeing is that the Syrian Christian, the Jewish and the Arab Muslim communities seem to have actually become powerful constituents of our social life, both the late medieval as well as modern, and other communities have just commingled into what you could perhaps call a cosmopolitanism of material life. Now, you know what? The cosmopolitanism of material life is something that we all live on a daily basis, but we do not understand, we do not make sense of it. For example, if any Malayali kitchen, go to a traditional Malayali kitchen, all those utensils that we used in those traditional kitchens, you will find exactly the same in Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Now, obviously, there's nothing essentially Malayali about that. All these symbols of upper caste culture that our filmmakers keep, dishing back to us, Ranjit's Tarawads, etc. You will find even better Tarawads in Malaysia. In fact, you should go and shoot there. You'll find much better, unspoiled Tarawads in the Menengkabahu area where the matrilineal Malay Muslims live in Malaysia. In fact, they surpass any existing Tarawad in Kerala in terms of architectural similarity. The Vastu techniques are exactly the same. So obviously there is a shared culture. These point to shared technologies which have not really been the focus of attention of historians or cultural studies scholars and so on. So this is what I mean when I say a cosmopolitanism of material life. So there is a way in which some communities have just disappeared into this cosmopolitanism of material life, which we do not recognize as a cosmopolitanism anymore. It's become so familiar, we identify them with essentially Malayali. If you know that, I'm sure you know many examples of this. Many of our cuisine, for example, Malayali cuisine is actually not exclusively Malayali by any stretch of imagination. A whole lot, some of the items of our cuisine which we prize are actually shared by other countries like Sri Lanka and Malaysia. Anyway, so I'll get into that later. But Nandi's reading then therefore makes us impossible to consider the consequences of the political framework of cultural pluralism and hospitality that he's always talking about. And this framework is given to us by what? By the Hindu kingdoms, who insisted that any foreign community was welcome to settle in Kerala so long as it was willing to stay within the given Brahminical order of caste. So whether it's the Arab Muslims, whether it is the Syrian Christians, or whether it's the Jews, they were allowed, they were respected and welcomed and assigned status within the caste order. While there are other communities that did not really fit the bill, the historical evidence is quite interesting on this count. I have a letter, which I'm not going to quote, but I'll just mention this, which was written by the Koalathiri to the King of Portugal in 1507, where he says, certain people who I and my Nayars have as slaves and belong to two castes, the Tines, that is the Tiyas, and the Mukuas, and that's a Mukuas, should not be made Christians. Why? For the conversion of these slaves, conflict may arise between our vassals and these people. Our Nayars derive our income from them and they do not want to lose it. So clearly, you welcome here with your religion and your difference and all. Don't try fiddling with caste society. So this is what the Koalathiri writes to the King of Portugal in 1507. So very clear. So there's evidence. And you all know, I don't have to repeat this, and I really don't want to, for a Malayali audience, you would know that this narrative device, that enables a specific kind of narrative device that enables the Hindu to occupy center space, in regional identity, was shared across several discourses and history. You'll find that in history. Now take, for example, K.M. Panikar's